Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, August 10th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about Minnesota's 1st Congressional District. Now, last night, Minnesota's 1st District had a special election in which they were replacing their congressman who unfortunately passed away. That congressman was Representative Jim Hagedorn, and he was a Republican who won here back in 2020 by a margin of about 3 points district-wide. However, though he did win by 3 points in the last congressional election, President Trump won in this district by about 10 points. In 2016, in that presidential election, Donald Trump won in this district as well by about 15. So this congressional district, in terms of the presidential results, has been pretty lopsided in favor of the GOP. The last time it was won by a Democrat was President Barack Obama, but even then, he was only able to narrowly win the district. Looking at the 1st district in more recent years, you find that it has been trending rightward very, very quickly. The last Democrat to hold this seat was actually the governor, who is in the state right now, Governor Tim Walz, who is up for re-election, who won by less than a point in the 2016 presidential election. It has been very clear that Minnesota's 1st district has been rightward trending, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be looking at these results and analyzing them, this 4-point margin for Brad Finstad, and whether or not that actually means anything for this November. And honestly speaking, it probably does. So, on the base level, the first thing that I would like to address is whether or not we are going to be looking at the last congressional results or the presidential results as an indicator as to whether or not Democrats did better or worse than where they were in 2020. Now, those on either side of the political aisle might be inclined to tell you one or the other, and I will say that we have to recognize both. But however, personally, I am inclined to trust the presidential results slightly more, and I'll talk about that very briefly. In the 2020 election, the results here were very close, to say the least. Looking at it, it was decided by a narrower margin than the special election, and looking at how it was on the presidential level, significantly narrower than that. But this Republican had a lot of issues. This Republican was scandal-plagued, someone who had associated themselves with the wrong side of the Black Lives Matter movement, taking and making comments that were unfortunately very negative, to say, and entirely, looking at it from an objective standpoint, he should not have said what he said. And as a result, those donors, those big corporations that funneled money into his campaign, actually asked for their donations back. The comments were so bad that they said that they need to go ahead and get their donations back because they could not, in good conscience, or maybe for the sake of their own company, back this person who has been saying things while being funded by such big corporations. In addition to that, right before the campaign, he got caught up into this scandal about whether or not, he used a rent-free office. There were things associated with his wife as well, in which she had to be removed from leadership later down the line. So, to put it quite frankly, he was scandal-plagued, and that was really what defined the 2020 campaign for him. Had he headed into another blue wave year such as 2022, he might have narrowly held on considering how rightward trending the district was, but knowing how it was redistricted, in addition to that, knowing how scandal-plagued he was, in fact, after winning, beyond the campaign, he was investigated. There are things that weigh down candidates, and I honestly think either he would have been primaried or would have lost the next election. So when you keep that in mind for 2020, you realize there is a reason why the Democrat here outperformed President Biden. There is a reason why voters in this district made it narrower than they did on the presidential level, and that's because of candidate quality. Now, for this special election, this open seat, you typically see things revert back to how they would vote on the presidential level. That's just simply how it is. But sometimes you can get an indicator, rightward or leftward, as to whether or not there is an improvement for either political party. Now, in some special elections we have seen, such as the one in Texas or, the one in other parts of the country, one actually coming up in the state of New York, which will be very, very closely watched, we have seen a bunch of different takes and really just characterizations about the way that these special elections have gone. Because some of them, Democrats have done better, and some of them, Republicans have done better. But specifically in Minnesota's 1st district, I will say that I do believe the Democratic Party did outperform where they were expected to in this congressional district. When you take a look at some of these margins relative to where President Biden was in the district, you see massive improvements. Now, you did see some drawbacks for the Democrat here in some of the rural areas. It looks as if the rural areas have gotten even more Republican. But in the suburban and urban areas, Democrats actually improved. This congressional district is one that joins an array of special elections that have been held since the 2020 elections. But another one I would like to point out is the one in the state of Nebraska. Yes, also another 1st congressional district, in which the Republican Mike Flood defeated the Democrat Patty Pansing-Brooks by a margin of about 6 points. This is a congressional district that Donald Trump won in the last election by double digits. To see a special election in what is expected to be a red wave year, where in special elections in 2009 and 2010 and 2013 and 2014 all favored the Republican Party leading into their midterms, Democrats are starting to do better. And the two major things, or the one major thing that has happened before these two special elections were able to hit the ballot, was the overturning of Roe versus Wade. The Dobbs v. Jackson decision that resulted in the overturning that the Democratic Party has been using to capitalize and expand where they were in the last election. We have now seen it not once, but also twice, and also the results that we have seen in the state of Kansas in their referendum. Nothing seems to be indicating at this point that a red wave is imminent. But I would still say that there probably is one coming around. I think the Republican Party is going to rebound from this point, but I will say that if it does continue in a month or 2 months from now, or that August election that we will see in just about a week and a half in the state of New York moves in favor of the Democratic Party, or actually not even a week and a half, about a week from now, what we are going to see is that might actually have some severe national implications for the GOP. This special election was one that was supposed to be a very good result for the GOP. I mean, when you take a look at the characterizations within this special election, let's see if we can go ahead and just pull it up here. It is very interesting because the predictions were solid and likely are. And the likely Republican characterization was changed as of late, but it was expected pretty solidly to be a very solid Republican district. When you take a look at the Nebraska ratings for that congressional election, you found that the predictions were solid R all across the board. And yet, in both cases, in Minnesota and Nebraska, these predictions seem to be wrong. This district that was supposed to be solid red did not end up being solid red and was ultimately decided by a margin of about 4 points district-wide. I can't really seem, to really show you exactly why this is so significant. I think it's something that people and Republicans and Democrats really need to understand themselves. This is a district that President Trump won by 10 points in the last election. I don't care what happened in a congressional election in which the Republican was scandal-plagued. I mean, there is something called candidate quality, and it is so important. And when you look at open elections, you typically don't compare it to the last congressional election. I mean, when you take a look at our Senate election map, you don't talk about Rob Portman's 20-point victory in 2016 as a reason why J.D. Vance is going to win in 2022. That's because there are new candidates in the race. There is a non-incumbent when there used to be an incumbent who was either A, popular, or B, unpopular, and clearly unpopular was the case in the state of Minnesota. This is a district that Donald Trump also won in 2016 by 15 points. So at best, Brad Finstad is outperforming a scandal-plagued Republican by 1 point in a red wave year that is expected to be 6 to 7 points more conservative than it was in the last election, while also underperforming President Trump, who, might I add, lost Minnesota twice. So no matter what way you cut it, either Brad Finstad is outperforming a Republican by 1 point, a scandal-plagued Republican, in a year that is expected to be 6 to 7 points more Republican, or he's just not doing as well as Republicans would have liked to think. The Minnesota 1st District results are, honestly speaking, not the best for the GOP. It doesn't mean they're doomed. This is not a Democratic pickup. If it was a 2018 type of environment, Democrats would have gotten closer. But it does mean that 2022 is not the Republican Party's reincarnation of 2010 or 2014. It might end up being a year closer to being a very narrow majority for the GOP. The House majority is easy to see how they get it, but it is also becoming increasingly more difficult to see how the GOP wins control of the Senate and has a large majority in the House. If you had asked me months ago, or even in November of 2021 after Glenn Youngkin's victory, I would have been much more confident in the GOP's ability to solidly win the House, easily win the Senate, and win numerous governorships and state legislative races up and down the ballot. But since November, or since even the beginning of this year, the Democratic Party has started to improve, to a point where today they now lead on the generic ballot for the first time in 9 consecutive months. Things are changing, and they are changing in favor of the Democratic Party. And both of these special elections, from Nebraska, which was supposed to be solid red, that was decided by 6, the one in Minnesota that was supposed to be solid and likely red, that was decided by 4, What is happening here is that these districts that Trump is winning by double digits are narrowing down, and the only thing we can really pinpoint it to is the Dobbs decision. Because practically every election prior to this one, before the Dobbs decision, helped the GOP. The final test of our election cycle will be the one in about a week from now in the state of New York. That will be the first and final real test, not the first one, but the final real test as to whether or not the GOP actually has made significant improvements, because that district, honestly speaking, should flip to the GOP. It doesn't matter that there's a Democrat there. That district is extremely competitive, and we will see what happens. But if it doesn't flip, what we will find is that the Republican Party won't be as strong in that election as they otherwise might have been in a year or a situation without the Dobbs decision. I think what we are seeing here is a very clear pushback on the GOP and a very clear level of excitement for Democrats to a point where they are outperforming their president of the United States. I mean, looking at the outperformance for Jeffrey Ettinger, this is pretty significant. You know, outperforming by double digits in some of these districts or some of these counties within the district, which is very, very impressive. I think what we will find looking into the midterms is that the Democratic Party is certainly on track to do much better than where they were in the past. But I can't say that I still think that, or I think that at any point Democrats are going to win control of the House. I have been very confident in this prediction that I believe the House is a foregone conclusion. But Democrats today have about a 21% chance of victory in the House of Representatives. 21% is not the worst, but it's certainly not the best. Democrats had about flipped odds for the 2018 House elections. In the United States Senate, though, the numbers look a lot better for the Democratic Party. Republicans have about a 40% chance of victory. Democrats have about a 60% chance of victory. It looks a lot different than it does on the House level, and this is with the deluxe model, with ratings that, honestly speaking, might be different than they are today. The Democrats in the classic model have a 72% chance of victory, and in the light model, a 78% chance of victory. But I'd still roll with deluxe, though some of these ratings don't change as quickly as we'd like, with some major changes happening across the nation. But for right now, 60-40 is still not the worst position that the Democratic Party would like to be in. Looking at the House elections, though, it practically is still a foregone conclusion. But looking at the state of Minnesota, I will say that Democrats can still hold out hope. Not that they will win this district, not that they will win the House, but that they will be able to hold on to a number of seats that they otherwise might have lost had the Dobbs decision not been released. Looking at our redistricting map here for 2022, there are a number of seats that the Democratic Party is going to lose, simply put, because these districts are gerrymandered. But in many of these competitive districts, though there are very few, Democrats could very well win or hold on to some of the ones that they have right now. Because we are seeing some of these more Republican districts narrow up, you'd imagine that we were in a 2017 or 2018 type of environment, but that's just not where we are. Where we are today is a 2022 national environment, but the question is, what is that environment? 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I would have said an automatic red wave here. Today, I'm struggling to say that. I'm still holding out and saying that I believe the Republican Party will win control of the House, but I'm getting more doubtful as the days go on. Yesterday, I was 5% doubtful. Today, I'm 10% doubtful. And it might continue to increase, but Republicans could also prove me wrong in that sense, or that 10% of me that believes that Democrats might be able to hold on to the House. The House has been so lopsided in favor of the GOP, especially following such a beneficial year for the GOP in redistricting. Not as beneficial as 2010 for sure, but definitely beneficial. Take a look at that new maps versus old maps. If this was truly a representation of our nation, it would be much more close, but obviously it isn't, because gerrymandering exists and the Republican Party has lopsided benefits by just simply controlling much more of the state legislatures. As Donald Trump said, elections have consequences, and I think that's much more accurate on the redistricting level than I would say on practically any other level, because it ingrains and instills Democratic or Republican leadership in a state or country for nearly decades at a time. And, looking at the House map for 2022, the Democratic Party would likely fare better on a map where redistricting went slightly different. Maybe they held out with the Supreme Court victories in Ohio. Maybe they didn't get stricken down in Maryland or New York. And yes, it was partisan gerrymandering, but you can't tell me that Republicans didn't do it too, and you can't tell me that Republicans didn't do it to a higher extent. This is a criticism of both parties. Gerrymandering is very rampant across the nation, but what it does is remove less competitive seats. But in this election, honestly, it might help the Democratic Party, because there are going to be many elections that are significantly closer or expected to be significantly closer than both Minnesota and Nebraska's 1st district in their special elections. Many of these districts are going to be more competitive, and as a result, Democrats are probably going to do better following the Dobbs decision than they otherwise might have. The House, again, to reiterate, I think is a foregone conclusion, but I will say that these results are really proving us wrong in this wild expectation that the Republican Party, or a wide expectation, not wild, wide expectation that the GOP is going to be significantly outperforming where they were in 2020 and 2018. 2018 partially makes sense, but is becoming a little bit harder to believe day after day as more results come out showing the Democratic Party in what would be a result in 2017 or 2018, a year that is expected to be so beneficial to the GOP. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.